But there's a dangerous misconception floating around that being good means being harmless. That if you're nice, polite, and agreeable, you'll win in life. But let me tell you something straight. Harmless people get ignored, stepped on, and sometimes destroyed. It's not the world's job to protect you. But it's your job to know how to protect yourself. I want you to imagine a lion, calm, still, not hunting. From the outside, it looks peaceful. But everyone around that lion knows. If it needs to, it can unleash a level of power that would end a fight before it even begins. That's the energy you need to cultivate. Controlled strength. The capacity to be dangerous. But the wisdom to use it only when absolutely necessary. People respect what they fear losing. That includes their safety, but their power and their comfort. When you have no strength, you don't inspire respect. You inspire exploitation. But and no one's going to admit they're taking advantage of you. They'll just keep doing it until you have nothing left. Building that strength starts with you. Physically, but you train your body. You don't need to be an elite athlete, but you do need to be capable of defending yourself, of standing tall, of projecting confidence. But when you walk into a room, people should sense that you're not someone to be pushed around. Mentally, you sharpen your mind. Study human behavior. Learn how to read people. But not just listen to what they say. Understand that most conflicts don't start when fists fly. They start with words, body language, and subtle shifts in energy. But the more you recognize those patterns, the earlier you can intercept them. Emotionally, you build discipline. Anyone can lose their temper. But that's not strength. That's weakness disguised as aggression. True strength is control. It's being able to stay composed even when someone is trying to provoke you, knowing you could shut them down, but choosing the moment carefully. Some of you might be thinking, I don't want to be scary. I want to be kind. Good. Be kind. Be compassionate. But understand this: kindness without power is naivety. Power without kindness is tyranny. You need both. Because when you're strong and you choose kindness, it's real, not a survival tactic to avoid conflict. If you want to survive, if you want to be respected, if you want to walk through life with confidence, you need to be capable of being dangerous, not reckless, not aggressive for no reason, but powerful, controlled, a force people know not to underestimate. You don't do this for the sake of intimidation. You do it so you never have to live in fear again. So you can protect the people you care about, so you can walk into any environment, the boardroom, the street, the negotiation table, and know you are not at the mercy of anyone. Train your body, sharpen your mind, harden your spirit. But become the person no one wants to challenge, not because you're violent, but because you're prepared. But because you carry yourself like someone who knows exactly what they're capable of. People often confuse being good with being harmless. But and that's one of the most dangerous mistakes you can make in life. Harmlessness doesn't protect you. It makes you vulnerable. When you're harmless, but you don't inspire respect, you invite exploitation. People may smile to your face and tell you they value your kindness, but behind closed doors. But they will use you if they know you can't push back. The world isn't built to reward passivity. It's built to test your boundaries. If you have none, but or if your boundaries are weak, you'll be treated accordingly. Think about how nature works. In the wild, no predator targets the strongest, healthiest animal in the herd. But they look for the weakest, the slowest, the most defenseless. That's instinct. And humans, despite all our social rules and laws, are no different in this regard. But people subconsciously gauge whether you can defend yourself physically, mentally, emotionally. And they treat you based on that assessment. But if they sense you won't fight back, some will take advantage. Not all, but enough to make it a problem. This isn't about living in fear or expecting the worst from everyone. But it's about understanding human nature and the reality that not everyone has your best interests at heart. The problem is, many people grow up being taught to avoid conflict at all costs, to always be agreeable, to never say no. They believe that if they're endlessly polite, But there are. The world will be kind in return. That belief is shattered the moment they encounter someone who sees their politeness as weakness. Our harmlessness is not the same thing as goodness. You can be a genuinely good person and still be someone others know not to cross. In fact, but there are. The people who do the most good in this world often have a backbone of steel. They know that in order to protect themselves and others, they must first be capable of standing up to those who would do harm. Without that capability, your kindness is little more than a shield made of paper. It might look nice. There are, but it will crumble the moment it's tested. The truth is, the more harmless you are, the more likely you are to be put into situations where you feel powerless. But there are. You'll be the one who gets extra work dumped on you because no one thinks you'll complain. But there are. You'll be the one who endures unfair treatment in relationships because you're afraid to walk away. But they are. You'll be the one who gets talked over in meetings because you're not willing to assert yourself. But there are. It's not that people consciously decide to mistreat you. It's that human nature pushes people to see what they can get away with. And if you don't push back, they'll keep going. Strength, in contrast, changes everything. When you carry yourself like someone who can defend themselves, people feel it. It's not about physical size. It's about presence. But there are. It's in your posture, your eye contact, the tone of your voice. It's the quiet confidence that says, there are. I am not someone you can manipulate. People pick up on these cues instantly, and they adjust their behavior accordingly. They may still test you from time to time. But there are. But the more they realize you won't tolerate disrespect, the less they'll try. Now, strength doesn't mean aggression. But there are. It doesn't mean walking around looking for a fight or intimidating people for no reason. That's insecurity disguised as toughness. Real strength is calm. But there are. It's having the ability to handle yourself in a confrontation, but not needing to prove it every 5 minutes. It's knowing you could respond with force. There are, but choosing your moments wisely. The paradox is that the more capable you are, the less often you'll have to actually use that capability. But there are. People respect those who have power under control. You have to understand that respect is not given out of pity. But there are, and it's not given just because you're a good person. Respect is earned through your ability to demonstrate that you're not to be underestimated. If you can't enforce your boundaries don't exist. If you can't say no and back it up, your cause means nothing. But there are. Harmlessness strips you of that leverage entirely. It makes you dependent on other people's goodwill, and that is a fragile place to live. Building strength to avoid harmlessness starts with self-awareness. You need to recognize the areas where you allow yourself to be taken advantage of. Maybe it's at work, but there are where you never speak up even when something is unfair. Maybe it's in relationships where you tolerate behavior you know isn't right because you're afraid of conflict. But there are. Maybe it's in everyday interactions where you apologize for things that aren't even your fault. These patterns keep you in a position of weakness. But there are. The first step is to see them for what they are. From there, you start building yourself up. Physically, but there are. You work on your health and fitness, not because you want to be a fighter, but because physical strength builds mental confidence. When you know you can defend yourself. But there are. You walk differently, and people notice. Mentally, you study human behavior. You learn to read subtle cues in body language and tone so you can spot manipulation before it escalates. Emotionally, you train yourself to handle discomfort. But there are. Conflict won't kill you, but avoiding it at all costs will slowly erode your life. Harmlessness may seem safe, but it's actually dangerous. But there are. It leaves you at the mercy of anyone willing to take what you have, whether that's your time, your energy, or your dignity. When you're strong, but you create a shield around yourself. Not one made of fear, but one made of capability. People can sense when you're not an easy target, and many won't even try to test you. And the ones who do, they'll quickly realize they made a mistake. The bottom line is, you don't need to become aggressive or lose your kindness to stop being harmless. You just need to develop to ensure that when someone tries to push push you, you can push back. Hard enough to make them think twice before trying again. Great. That's not cruelty. That's self-respect. That's survival. And without it, you're trusting the world to treat you well out of the goodness of its heart. A gamble you will eventually lose. Power without control is chaos. It's unpredictable, messy, and often destructive. If you have strength but no discipline, you become a danger not just to others but to yourself. Controlled power, on the other hand, is what makes someone truly formidable. It's the ability to act decisively, to defend yourself, to stand firm under pressure, while still maintaining composure. It's knowing that you could crush a situation if you wanted to, but also knowing when not to. That balance is what separates dangerous people from powerful leaders. Think about the most dangerous animals in the wild. The apex predators aren't running around attacking anything that moves. They conserve their energy. They choose their targets. They wait until the moment is right, and when they move, they do it with precision and efficiency. That's not recklessness. That's control. But the same principle applies to human behavior. The person who's always loud, always aggressive, always ready to argue is actually easy to read. Their lack of control exposes them. The person you need to be wary of is the one who's calm, measured, and deliberate. Because you know they're not reacting emotionally, but they're calculating. Control starts in the mind. You can't command your actions if you can't command your thoughts. But emotional regulation is the foundation of controlled strength. That means not letting someone's insult, disrespect, or attempt to provoke you dictate your response. But anyone can lash out in anger, but not everyone can absorb a provocation, think strategically, and decide the best course of action. When you have that kind of control, you stop being reactive and start being proactive. You don't give your opponent the satisfaction of knowing they've gotten under your skin. And you don't waste energy on battles that don't matter. Having control also means recognizing when force, whether physical, verbal, or strategic, is necessary. And when it's not. Some situations require an immediate and strong response to set boundaries and stop further escalation. Others are better handled by walking away. Gathering information or taking a more subtle approach. Without control, you can't make those distinctions. You'll either overact and make the situation worse, or underact and allow someone to take advantage of you. Controlled power is about having the discernment to choose the right tool for the moment. Part of that discernment comes from self-awareness. You have to understand your own triggers. What makes you lose your temper? What makes you feel defensive? What situations cause you to shut down instead of speak up? The more you understand your own responses, the more you can anticipate them and adjust in real time. This doesn't mean suppressing your emotions. It means channeling them productively. Anger can be a powerful motivator when used correctly. But fear can sharpen your awareness if you don't let it paralyze you. Every emotion you feel is a potential source of power if you know how to control it. But another aspect of control is restraint. When you're capable of overpowering someone, physically, verbally, or strategically, it's tempting to prove your strength in every interaction. But restraint is often more powerful than action. It communicates confidence. But it tells people you're not desperate to prove yourself because you already know what you can do. When you hold back, you leave people guessing about the extent of your capabilities, and that uncertainty works in your favor. Over time, this builds a reputation, you're someone who doesn't act unless you mean it, and when you do act, it's decisive. Controlled power also creates trust. But people follow those who can stay calm under pressure because they know they won't be led into unnecessary danger. In leadership, whether it's in a workplace, a family, or a team, your ability to stay composed directly impacts how others respond to you. If you panic, they panic. If you stay calm, they're more likely to follow your lead. But the same applies in personal relationships. Control makes you reliable. It shows people that you're not unpredictable or reckless, and that when you make a move, it's thought through. Training yourself to have controlled power takes time. It starts with small situations. Maybe someone cuts you off in traffic, but instead of honking aggressively or yelling out the window, you take a breath and let it go. Not because you're weak, but because you've decided that your energy and focus are better spent elsewhere. Maybe at work, a colleague tries to undermine you in a meeting. Instead of firing back immediately and creating a scene, you note what happened. Gather your facts and address it strategically with the right people afterward. These small acts of control build the habit, so when a truly high-stakes situation comes, your instinct is to think first and act second. This kind of control doesn't dull your strength. It amplifies it. Imagine two people in a conflict. One is red-faced, shouting, visibly agitated. The other is calm, steady, speaking with purpose. Who do you think has the advantage? The one who's in control, because they're not wasting mental bandwidth on emotional outbursts. But they can think clearly, adapt to the situation, and choose the exact moment to strike, if they even need to strike at all. It's important to remember that control doesn't mean inaction. Some people mistake composure for passivity, but controlled power is still power. It's just directed with precision. When the moment calls for it, you act decisively and with full force. The difference is, you're not swinging wildly hoping to land a hit. You're taking the exact shot you know will end the conflict. And because you don't lash out unnecessarily, but your actions carry more weight when you do take them. People will remember those moments. Controlled power is about living with intention, but it's about not letting the world dictate your reactions or emotions. It's about being the person others look at and think, great, they could end this if they wanted to, but they're choosing not to. That's where real respect comes from. But it's not just about having the strength. It's about having the wisdom to use it sparingly and effectively. And when you master that balance, you stop being someone who merely survives challenges and become someone who commands every environment you step into. But the way you carry yourself speaks before you even open your mouth. People judge capability in seconds, often without realizing it. And one of the first things they notice is your physical presence. This isn't just about looking fit or athletic. It's about the signals your body sends to the world. But a strong, confident physical presence tells people that you take yourself seriously, that you're capable, and that you won't be easily pushed around. But if you look like someone who can be overpowered, many will assume you can be taken advantage of. If you project strength, fewer people will even consider testing you. Your physical presence starts with the basics: posture, movement, and how you occupy space. Standing tall with your shoulders back communicates confidence and self-respect. Slouched posture communicates uncertainty, hesitation, and even submission. The difference may seem small, but it shapes how others treat you. But in high-stakes environments, whether it's a negotiation, a public interaction, or a confrontation, people who stand strong and maintain eye contact are taken more seriously than those who shrink themselves. Training your body plays a huge role in this. Strength training, martial arts, or even basic fitness routines change the way you look, move, and feel. When you know your body can handle physical challenges, you project an energy that others notice instantly. It's not about becoming the biggest or most muscular person in the room. It's about building capability. But you don't need to look like a professional fighter, but you should carry yourself like someone who could defend themselves if necessary. But that subtle readiness is often enough to deter trouble before it starts. It's not just about muscle or size. It's about how you use what you have. Controlled, deliberate movement shows calm confidence. Fidgeting, nervous gestures, or frantic pacing signal vulnerability. Intense situations. But people naturally look to those who seem physically stable and grounded. They instinctively trust someone who moves with purpose over someone who seems uneasy or unsure. But that's why training matters. Not only does it give you the ability to defend yourself, it also teaches you how to manage your body in high-pressure moments. Your voice is part of your physical presence too. Speaking with clarity, volume, and certainty is just as important as how you stand. A quiet, but there are, hesitant tone can undermine even the strongest physical appearance. People listen to those sound sure of themselves. But you don't have to be loud or aggressive. You just have to speak in a way that commands attention. This comes from confidence. And confidence comes from preparation and self-discipline. Physical presence also involves situational awareness. But the most confident people are those who are aware of their surroundings and know how to position themselves strategically. Great. But that means keeping your back to a wall in crowded places so you can see what's happening around you. Or maintaining a safe distance in tense conversations so you have space to react if needed. This kind of awareness communicates that you're alert and ready, not distracted or unaware. When you develop your body and physical presence, something else changes, your mindset. Training teaches discipline. But it forces you to push through discomfort, stay consistent, and face challenges head-on. Those qualities spill over into every part of your life. But you become more resilient not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. The more capable you feel, the more your body language reflects it. And the more people pick up on it. But there's also a protective psychological effect. People who project strength are often treated with more respect, even by strangers. This isn't about intimidation. It's about signaling that you value yourself enough to take care of your body and stand with confidence. In the same way that predators in nature avoid animals that look healthy and strong, people tend to avoid conflict with those who clearly take care of themselves. A strong physical presence can change the outcome of everyday situations. Imagine walking into a job interview looking tired, slouched, but and unsure. You'll have to work harder to prove yourself verbally. Now imagine walking in with upright posture, steady eye contact, and a firm handshake. Before you even speak, you've already earned a degree of respect. The same principle applies to social interactions, negotiations, and there are even potential conflicts on the street. But this isn't something you can fake for long. Real presence comes from real capability. That's why training is non-negotiable. Whether it's lifting weights, practicing self-defense, or simply committing to daily movement, you're not just building muscle. You're building the foundation for how you carry yourself in the world. When you know you've put in the work, you naturally stand taller. But move with purpose and speak with more certainty. It's worth mentioning that your physical presence should align with control. But being strong without being grounded can make you seem aggressive or unpredictable, which often backfires. But the goal is to combine strength with composure. Looking like someone who can handle themselves, but who also has no need to prove it unnecessarily. But that balance earns you respect rather than fear, and it opens doors rather than closing them. For many, the journey to building a strong physical presence starts with small changes. Correct your posture. Make eye contact in conversations. Speak clearly instead of rushing your words. Then add consistent physical training into your routine, even if it's just bodyweight exercises at first. Over time, you'll notice the shift. Not just in how you look and feel, but in how people respond to you. Ultimately, your physical presence is your first line of communication with the world. Long before you share your ideas, make your case, or stand up for yourself in words. But people are reading your body and deciding how to treat you. If you want respect, you have to present yourself as someone who deserves it. But that starts with taking responsibility for your body, your posture, your movements, and the way you occupy space. When you combine physical readiness with calm, controlled confidence, you send a clear message. You are not someone to be underestimated. Your mind is your sharpest weapon. But most people never train it to its full potential. They train their bodies, they practice their skills, but when it comes to sharpening their mental edge, they leave it to chance. The truth is, mental sharpness is what allows you to navigate complex situations, read people accurately, and stay 2 steps ahead in any interaction. Without it, physical strength and good intentions can only take you so far. Being mentally sharp means you see the game before it's played. And that ability changes everything. It starts with observation. Most people only listen to words, but words are the least reliable indicator of truth. People lie. They omit details. They tell you what they think you want to hear. But the body rarely lies. A flicker of hesitation, a shift in tone, but a change in breathing. These are the signs that reveal what someone is really thinking. But training yourself to notice these subtle cues gives you an advantage in every area of life, whether it's spotting dishonesty in a negotiation, sensing tension in a conversation before it escalates, or recognizing when someone's confidence is just a front. To sharpen your mind, you have to slow down and pay attention. But most of us rush through interactions, already planning what we're going to say next instead of really absorbing what's happening in front of us. But the people who truly understand others are the ones who can quiet their own inner noise long enough to listen, watch, and analyze without distraction. But that means making eye contact, reading facial expressions, noticing changes in body language, and listening not just to what's being said, but to how it's being said. But mental sharpness also requires preparation. You can't walk into high-stakes situations hoping you'll figure it out on the spot. You need to gather information ahead of time, understand the dynamics at play, and anticipate possible outcomes. That way, you're not just reacting, you're directing the flow. But this applies in everything from business to personal relationships. If you know what motivates someone, what they fear, and what they value, you can shape your communication to influence the outcome in your favor. A critical part of being mentally sharp is pattern recognition. Human behavior is remarkably predictable once you've seen enough of it. People repeat patterns, sometimes for years, without realizing it. If you can spot those patterns early, you can predict their next move and prepare accordingly. This is why experience is so valuable. But the more situations you've been in and the more people you've observed, the better you get at recognizing familiar scenarios and knowing how to handle them. But mental sharpness isn't just about reading other people. It's also about managing yourself. Stress, fear, and anger can cloud judgment faster than anything else. If you can't keep your own emotions in check, you can't think clearly enough to read a situation accurately. Emotional discipline gives you the ability to pause, assess, and act strategically instead of impulsively. It's the difference between saying something you regret in a heated moment and using that moment to gain the upper hand. But you can train this discipline in everyday life. When someone cuts you off in traffic, instead of instantly reacting with frustration, ask yourself if it's worth your energy. When someone challenges you in a meeting, resist the urge to fire back right away. Instead, listen, gather your thoughts, and respond with something measured and impactful. But these small moments of control build the habit of thinking before acting, which is the foundation of mental sharpness. Another element is adaptability. No matter how well you prepare, situations will change, and you need to be able to adjust without losing your composure. But that requires a flexible mind, one that's not locked into a single plan but can pivot when the circumstances demand it. This is especially important in confrontations or negotiations, where the other party may deliberately try to throw you off balance. If you can adapt while staying calm, you keep the advantage. Mental sharpness also comes from curiosity. People who are constantly learning, asking questions. And exploring new ideas develop a richer understanding of the world and the people in it. This knowledge becomes a toolkit you can draw from in any situation. The more perspectives you understand, the more angles you can see in a problem, and the more solutions you can find. Curiosity keeps your mind agile, but agility is what allows you to outthink someone who relies solely on force. One of the most underestimated aspects of mental sharpness is silence. Knowing when not to speak is important as knowing what to say. Silence makes people uncomfortable, and in that discomfort, they often reveal more than they intended. By resisting the urge to fill every gap in conversation, you create space for the other person to show their hand. This technique is used by skilled negotiators interrogators, but there are, and leaders alike, and it's incredibly effective because it leverages human nature against itself. To develop this level of mental acuity, you have to practice deliberately. Read books on psychology, negotiation, and human behavior. Study how people act under pressure. Observe interactions in public places. Or play strategy games that force you to think several moves ahead. And most importantly, put yourself in situations that challenge you. Comfort dulls the mind, challenge sharpens it. Over time, mental sharpness becomes second nature. You'll find yourself noticing details others overlook, staying calm when others panic, and predicting outcomes that seem obvious to you but invisible to everyone else. This doesn't make you manipulative. It makes you prepared. It allows you to protect yourself. But there are influence situations and lead effectively because you're not stumbling in the dark. You're moving with intention. But there are, when you combine mental sharpness with physical presence and controlled strength, you become very hard to deceive or intimidate. But there are, people sense when they're dealing with someone who sees through them, and that awareness often changes their behavior for the better. It's not about being suspicious of everyone. It's about being equipped to handle anyone. That's the real value of a sharp mind, though. It gives you clarity, control, and confidence in a world that often rewards the prepared over the well-meaning. Many people believe that kindness alone is enough to earn them respect, but that belief is flawed. Kindness without the ability to protect yourself is often mistaken for weakness. But when people sense that your kindness comes from fear of conflict or a desire to avoid confrontation, it loses its weight. They may smile at you. They may even appreciate your help, but deep down, they know they can cross boundaries without consequence. On the other hand, when kindness is backed by strength, it carries a completely different energy. It's no longer a survival strategy. It's a choice. And a choice made from a position of power is always more respected. But their true kindness is not about pleasing everyone or keeping the peace at all costs. It's about acting with compassion because you want to, not because you have to. But if you're kind because you're afraid of what will happen if you say no, that's not kindness. It's submission. People can sense the difference. But when you're strong enough to stand your ground, walk away, or defend yourself, your kindness becomes authentic. But it's no longer a mask you wear to keep trouble away. It's a genuine reflection of your values. Strength here doesn't just mean physical capability. Though that plays a role. It's also emotional resilience, mental clarity, and a willingness to enforce your boundaries. When you have that foundation, you can be generous, patient, and understanding without fear that someone will take advantage of you. You can listen to someone's struggles without letting them manipulate you. You can help people without draining yourself completely. Your kindness becomes intentional, not obligatory. This balance between power and kindness is rare, but and that's why it's so effective. People often assume that someone strong will be cold, aggressive, or unapproachable. When they meet someone who is both strong and kind, it challenges their expectations. They respect the strength, but they're drawn to the compassion. But that combination commands more loyalty and respect than either quality could alone. The danger of kindness without power is that it can make you dependent on the goodwill of others. You hope they'll treat you well because you've treated them well. You believe they'll remember your generosity and return the favor. But in reality, not everyone operates that way. Some people will take as much as they can get. But and when you have no leverage, no strength to back yourself up, you can't stop them. This leads to resentment, bitterness, and burnout. But you start to feel like your kindness is a curse instead of a strength. Kindness backed by strength flips that dynamic. But you're no longer giving because you have to in order to be accepted or safe. You're giving because you choose to. But and because you have the strength to say, enough. When necessary, you can maintain that kindness over the long term without it being drained from you. But this is what allows truly strong people to remain compassionate in a world that often tries to harden them. But They don't become bitter because they're not constantly being taken advantage of. But there are. Another reason this balance is powerful is that it makes your boundaries clear. When people see that you are capable of standing up for yourself, they think twice before pushing too far. They understand that your kindness isn't a weakness they can exploit. It's a quality you offer to those who respect it. But that creates healthier relationships, whether in personal life or in professional settings. You attract people who value both your strength and your empathy. And you repel those who only want to take. Being both strong and kind also changes the way you handle conflict. Without strength, you might avoid confrontation entirely, letting problems fester until they become unbearable. Without kindness, you might approach conflict with unnecessary aggression, damaging relationships in the process. But when you have both, you can address problems directly while still maintaining respect for the other person. You can speak the truth without cruelty. But you can hold people accountable without demeaning them. To develop this balance, you have to work on both sides. If you naturally lean toward kindness but struggle with standing up for yourself, focus on building your strength. Physically, mentally, and emotionally. Learn self-defense. Practice saying no without over-explaining. Train yourself to be comfortable with discomfort so you can face conflict without shutting down. On the other hand, if you already have strength, but tend to be overly aggressive or dismissive, work on softening your approach. Practice empathy. Listen more than you speak. Learn to see situations from multiple perspectives before making a judgment. It's important to understand that strength doesn't diminish kindness. It protects it. When you know you can defend yourself, you're not constantly on guard, and you don't have to view everyone as a potential threat. But you can approach people with openness because you know you have the means to handle things if they go wrong. This makes your kindness more sustainable and more genuine. Kindness without power often leads to a life of avoidance. You avoid saying no, avoid setting boundaries, avoid confrontation. But strength without kindness can lead to isolation. People may respect you, but they won't trust or connect with you. But when you put them together, you create something that people instinctively respond to. They feel safe around you, but they also know they can't take liberties with you. That's the sweet spot. One of the most telling signs of kindness backed by strength is that it doesn't need validation. You don't need people to thank you, acknowledge you, or reward you for your actions. You're not being kind to prove you're a good person. You already know who you are. And because you're not desperate for approval, but you can be selective about where you put your energy. That selectiveness is what keeps you from being drained and ensures your kindness remains genuine. Strength, control, presence, mental sharpness, and kindness backed by power are not separate qualities. They're parts of the same structure. Each one reinforces the others. Creating a foundation that's unshakable. Without strength, you can't enforce your boundaries. Without control, your strength becomes reckless and dangerous. Without presence, people won't take you seriously before you even speak. Without mental sharpness, you can't anticipate and navigate challenges effectively. And without kindness, your strength risks turning into cold, empty dominance. The world doesn't reward those who simply hope for the best. It rewards those who are prepared. But those who can navigate both chaos and calm with equal confidence. You don't develop these traits by accident. You build them deliberately. Through consistent effort and intentional practice. Every day offers opportunities to strengthen your body, refine your control, sharpen your mind. And practice climb a position of choice rather than obligation. Over time, these small, repeated actions transform not only the way you see yourself, but the way the world responds to you. The reality is that life will test you. There will be people who challenge you, situations that push you to your limits, and moments when you feel the pull to shrink back. If you haven't built strength, you'll give in. If you haven't cultivated control, you'll act impulsively and regret it later. If you haven't sharpened your mind, But there are, you'll miss the signs that could have guided you to better decisions. And if you've abandoned kindness, but there are, you'll lose the ability to inspire trust and connection in the people who matter. By embodying all these qualities, you create balance. But there are, you're capable of defending yourself, but wise enough to know that not every fight is worth engaging in. You can walk into any room with confidence. But there are, knowing you have both the physical presence and the mental acuity to handle whatever comes your way. You can deal with difficult people without being dragged down to their level. And most importantly, you can extend kindness freely without fear of it being mistaken for weakness, because you have the strength to protect it. This balance is rare, but there are, which is why it stands out. People notice when someone has the capacity to be dangerous but chooses not to be. They notice when someone carries themselves with confidence but treats with respect. That combination inspires trust, commands respect, but and builds influence in a way that raw power or pure kindness alone never could. But the goal isn't to intimidate or dominate, it's to become the kind of person who can walk through life without fear, who can stand up for themselves and others, but who can remain grounded no matter what storms come. This is the kind of strength that's unshakable because it's rooted in more than just muscle or words. It's rooted in discipline, self-awareness, and an unyielding commitment to growth. When you embody that, you don't just survive in the world, you shape it. You stop being at the mercy of others, but and you start setting the tone for how you will be treated, not through threats, but through the undeniable presence of someone who is both powerful and principled.